In this lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can gain a very fine level of control over the way that light interacts with particular objects in our scene. And we can do this by adjusting individual objects' render statistics. Okay, so for this example, we're going to go ahead and turn on the desk lamp in our test scene. And in this lesson, we'll look at a perfect example of a situation where we would not want certain objects to be able to cast or receive shadows. And we can use the render stats to make that possible. So in this particular example, let's go ahead and set up a light that is able to be emitted from this particular lamp. So if I come in and let's go to Create, Light, and we'll just use a simple point light to create this effect. So we'll try to line this up in our different views. Position this point light until it's pretty well inside the lamp itself. Sometimes this is easy to do if you use all your different views simultaneously. Okay, so that's pretty good. We have the actual light bulb that's now in there, or the actual light caster. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a quick render of this. All right, and we have the light that is basically inside of this piece of geometry. So let's come in just to add a little bit more light to this. Let's create a directional light just to overall add a very slight amount of light to this entire scene. All right, we can make this sort of a very soft light. Take a quick render of this. Okay, so that's good. That'll add just a little bit of sort of this overall environmental light to the scene, while still having the main focus as this desk lamp. Okay, so let's take this lamp with the light that's inside of it now. Let's take this light and enable its shadow casting. So, because this is going to be a transparent object, this little cup holder, or the pen holder, let's go ahead and turn on the ray trace shadows. In this scene, we'll go ahead and make sure the ray tracing is also turned on. And let's take a quick render of this, just to see what we wind up with. Okay, so far so good. We have now the light that's able to behave as if it's inside of this container. So the light sort of casts downward. Get a little bit of light and shadow that comes down on this pen holder. A little bit of the shadow line from the edge of this lamp. Very nice. Now, this would be pretty good if we were just going to leave this as it is now. But let's say that we had some geometry that we actually wanted to use as the light bulb, or as the actual physical light emitting source. So to test this out, let's turn on the desk lamp light. This is just a little piece of geometry that could be the light bulb or any other type of geometry. And let's back away and take a quick render of this. Right, and you can see now all of our light is gone. And that's because now we have this piece of geometry that's inside the lamp that's actually blocking any light from coming out. And this only becomes a problem when we actually enable the shadows themselves. If the shadows weren't enabled, we wouldn't have this problem. The light rays would go ahead and pass right through the object without any sort of problem. But because we want to be able to have shadows on the objects that this light's casting on, we've now gotten ourselves into a situation where there really is no easy, obvious solution. But in Maya, this is actually a very simple problem to fix. What we can do is select the object, and we'll go to its attributes. So select the object, press Ctrl-A on your keyboard, and take a look inside that geometry's shape node. All right, now if you look down inside that shape node, you should see an option for Render Stats. So let's expand this. And what we can do with these render stats is we can tell each individual object exactly how the light is to be reacting with it. So if we come in and tell this piece of geometry not to cast any shadows and also not to receive any shadows, because we don't want any shadows to necessarily cast back on it, what we should now see is a situation where the lights will go ahead and just let its shadow pass right through this piece of geometry. And it acts as if it's really not even there. Right? So this is a perfect situation where we would want to be able to utilize something like this. In the next lesson, we'll take a look at using shaders to actually mimic this piece of geometry acting as a actual physical light source. You can see even though we have the light itself that casts down, we really don't have this appearance of an actual light bulb or any kind of a light emitting object in this lamp itself. So by using a piece of geometry as the actual light emitting object or the appearance of the light emitting object, we want to make sure that the shadows do not interfere with that object, that they go ahead and just pass right through. So we can also control, in addition to the shadows, we have options for whether or not an object's primary visibility will be calculated. The primary visibility would be a perfect example if I take this little cup holder and turn off its primary visibility. What this will tell Maya is to go ahead and ignore it as far as the overall render is concerned, but still make it interact with shadows and things like that. Right? So with the primary visibility turned off, you can see the geometry itself is not visible, but the shadows and all the interactions from that geometry still get calculated as normal. So really a very impressive level of control that you can gain over your overall scenes by just being able to go in and on a per object basis control exactly how the light is to interact with it. So we have the primary visibility, whether or not it's going to cast or receive any shadows, whether or not an object is going to be visible in another shiny object's reflections, whether or not it refracts through any sort of transparent surfaces, and whether or not Maya considers this to be a double-sided surface, which in most situations you would probably want to go ahead and leave that on. Otherwise, you can see that the backside of something like this pen cup holder is no longer calculated. Right? It will go ahead and calculate the front areas that are facing toward us, but the backside of this piece of geometry, which is facing away from us, is no longer calculated. It becomes completely transparent. I could actually, once this is turned off, flip that to where it behaves the opposite manner. Now the backside is calculated, and now all these areas around the front are no longer taken into consideration. Again, most situations would call for you to go ahead and leave that turned on, the double-sided feature. Okay, so now that we have this scene set up in a way that we have the light bulb itself that's no longer interfering with any of the shadows, let's now start to, in the next lesson, start to look at how we can add certain shaders and certain secondary effects to really make this appear as if this piece of geometry is our light-emitting light bulb.